Good afternoon. Yes, it is afternoon, and welcome to the Road to Recovery, the Road to Freedom with Mark. This is my 28-minute show every day, every Friday, where I talk about mental health issues mostly. It's mostly what I talk about, but of course, the things that cause problems with mental health are many and varied, and normally it's something that's quite sudden, often. Sometimes not. Sometimes it's a grind, but generally speaking quite tragic, like a death or the breakup of a relationship, bullying, beating, torturing, all these kinds of things. It's normally something bad that happens that has that knock-on bad effect. You know, these things don't come from nowhere. They don't come out of the blue. And the bottom line is a direct result of what people do to people in a negative way. So my show is talking about what people can do for people in a positive way to counterbalance that. Okay? Now, sometimes people are dramatically mentally affected by things that are just accidents. Not intended necessarily to hurt anybody, they just happen. Sometimes they're not accidents, they're acts of stupidity, like bad driving, for example. You know, to call every single one of those an accident, when I see people overtaking 6 vehicles and a truck at 160 to 180 kilometres, and I see these things all of the time, that's not an accident. That's not. That's suicidal. You know that, I know that. That's why people die. That's why hundreds and hundreds of people die on the roads every year. And the effect of that, the mental illness that arises as a result of death, of sudden death, people being torn out of your life, parents, etc., has a dramatic knock-on effect, not just for a day or a week or a month. It can cast a shadow over people's entire lives. Right, so it might get a report, 5 people died, the media love that, in go the cameras, on the news, gone and forgotten the next day, but not by the people who suffer it. The knock-on effects of that go on for years and years and years. Now, Mr. David Seymour was on the television yesterday saying how great it was that the road tolls come down so far. Well, Mr. Seymour, as far as I'm concerned, it's an utter failure. 353 deaths, and that's with COVID, which means fewer cars, fewer deaths, right? A hell of a lot less than what there was before. If you think that's success, well, I'd like to meet you face to face here and have a little discussion about that, because as far as I'm concerned, 353 deaths is an absolute failure. We know for a fact, it's been reported on the news, that our roads are now in a very, very poor state, mostly thanks to the Greens arguing that we shouldn't be encouraging roads. Now, we've put so many trucks on there, they're tearing the roads to pieces. Finally, the government's had the good sense to realise that we need to do something about this urgently. Unfortunately, successive governments have pushed us off the railway tracks, where a lot of the stuff should be transported and onto roads. This has been happening with consecutive governments, National, Labour, you name it. I'm not for one party or another. I am apolitical as far as that goes. I favour none. But as far as I'm concerned, government has a responsibility protecting its people. That's what it's there for. That's what the voters put you there for. And you're not doing your job. And if you're dancing around singing about success when people are dying and suffering, then I think maybe you've lost your way. And it's not just the road toll that affects mental health, it's other things as well. It's suicide as well. And yesterday, you know, that was our National Day of Remembrance, if you like, and it's very important that we do, because anyone out there who is suffering needs to know, not just from me, but from you too, that they are important, that they do matter, that they're every bit as important as anybody else, and that pain can pass with a little bit of help. That's all we need, just a little bit of help. Doesn't have to be anything dramatic. The other thing in New Zealand that really affects things badly apart from that is poverty. Poverty is the greatest crime in society, worse than murder, because it causes things like that. Too many people are too poor, and it's not because there's not enough to go around. It's because a tiny minority have the vast majority of the wealth in this country and all over the world. Now, I'm not talking about all of us becoming communists. It's not what I'm pushing. What I'm talking about is just a better distribution of wealth so that people are not suffering. I see food banks on the TV, and I know how that affects people's mental health because I am amongst them. You know, I've been a whisper away from suicide many times myself. I've suffered through those hard days, and I know what it is to go hungry. I know how humiliating it is to have to rock up there and put your hand out and ask for help, ask for food. And I see a lot of my friends suffer this way, and I know that it's unnecessary. So, you know, we need to be more vocal, pushing our politicians, getting on radio stations like this and saying, hey, I find this unacceptable and we need to change this. Now, we're talking about a slightly higher taxation for those earning over $180,000. Well, that's just a sticking plaster. It really is, because those people can afford fancy accountants who can help them evade, or the term that they use is avoid, paying tax. That's what they do. That's what they're hired to do. The system is organised that way. So we need some honesty. Now, I know that politics is at one pole and honesty is on another. They are the most slippery liars you could ever hope to come across. So we need better people there. And we need more honesty and transparency. And we need people to be rewarded for their efforts. Those who work should not have to suffer the majority of the burden. They should know that when they retire, they're not going to struggle. They're not going to live hand to mouth. Everyone ought to be able to aspire. And that type of aspiration used to be that you could own your own quarter-acre patch. This was the Pavlova dream. You know, this was our paradise, but these dreams are gone now, and people right now are feeling vulnerable, uncertain, anxious, and there is more and more anxiety happening all the time, and you see it burst out when authoritarian governments stamp down on people, like what's happening in America, 100 days of rioting because the police are out there shooting black men in the back. I mean, you know, alarm bells should be ringing. We know what's wrong with society. Now, I realise that I'm talking about moving mountains, but it is possible. And the way that we do it is with one small step, one small shovelful at a time, and that is to each other. If we can lead by example in our community and not be as inconsiderate and selfish. For example, when you go to a public place like a supermarket, don't stand in the middle of the aisle with a massive shopping trolley blocking a way for everybody else, staring into the distance, daydreaming and catching flies in your mouth. Please don't do that. Show a little bit of consideration for other people. Just think, how would I feel if I was treated that way? Just for a second, put yourself in other people's shoes. And when you look at things that way, you realise that you want to be treated nicely. You want people to say please and thank you, show you a little bit of consideration, do the occasional kind thing. It costs you nothing. Nothing. It costs nothing to fix our society, and it is all very doable. Me to you, you to the next. That's how we do it. It's a groundswell, and this is what I've been trying to achieve for years and years and years. And I was banging away on about mental health years ago, when this was not a popular theme, when nobody cared, and I was just a voice in the wilderness. Now everyone's jumped on board, and I'm glad they have in some ways, but I also feel like it's a bit of a circus. Everyone's clambering to tell everyone what to do. But is it fixing anything? Well, no. What I'm talking about is fixing things. About anyone you know who's feeling a bit down, just let them know you care. It really is that simple. Use pedestrian crossings and teach children to do so. Upsetting other people through your own ignorance and self-serving only serves to disintegrate the society, to tear it apart. You're building fences higher, keeping others out, keeping you and yours in, being greedy and grasping and self-serving. And that is what erodes society. If we can turn that around at a community level, and that's what Arrow Radio is all about, giving people a voice, people talking to people about looking after each other, and banging away and not accepting things and saying, oh, well, never mind, there's nothing I can do, it's all too big for me. That's bullshit. That's just a cop-out, and I hear it all of the time by people in positions of power where they could actually do something. And here's little old me with nothing but a voice and a little radio station thanks to a few people who care. And I know that I am David and I am facing a Goliath all of the time. My whole life is like that. Living below the poverty line is no fun, I can assure you. What can I do? Well, I have a voice, and I'm prepared to use it. And I know that some people don't like what I say. Well, that's just tough titty, mate. Is everyone has a voice and everyone has an opinion, and this is what I'm trying to get through, is that we are all important. And if someone's talking some sense, then maybe your ears are not painted on. Maybe you should use them in the top 2 inches God gave you and do something about your situation rather than say, oh, well, never mind. Because every time you turn your back on me, you make the situation worse. Doing nothing makes it worse. Doing something makes it better. You can either choose to do something or choose to do nothing. Better or worse, it really is that simple. You to me, you to another. That's all it takes on that very basic level. And I know I bang on about this every week, but it's obvious that people need reminding of that. You know, not to just be concerned with I, me, mine, but realise that your neighbours are just as important as yourself. And that maybe we should be a little bit more mindful in these stressful days. Not enough people walk the streets. People just don't do it anymore. Get out there, have a walk, get down the river, clear your mind, clear your heart. That's what I have to do, because I get all jangly and upset and anxious about all the crazy shit that I see going around me, upsetting and annoying me every single day. So I try to get out amongst nature, which brings me at least a little bit of peace. And if you know someone who's suffering from a mental health issue, that's what I suggest you do. Take them for a walk down the river. Make it a regular thing if you can. And it's just amazing how therapeutic that can be, how cleansing it can be for the soul. Just to have a chat about any old thing that might come to mind. Something nice, something fun, something, have a bit of a laugh and forget about your troubles for a little while. Have a cup of tea. That's what it's really all about. It's about community. It's not about fast foods and, you know, instant satisfaction and being spoiled and you're so special and you mean everything and no one else means anything else. Get away from all the advertising bullshit that you are constantly drowning in about how you should be spoiled and, oh, FOMO, the fear of missing out. That's just bullshit. If you buy into that, you are a fool, okay? All that really matters is each other. That's all we have. And everything that you possess and everything that you gain in your life is gone when you stop breathing. It's all gone. Everything that you fought so hard for, struggled so much for, the biggest pile of gold in the cemetery. Well done, hooray. Now you got nothing. How much good do you do in life? That's what really matters. How you're remembered, what legacy you leave. Those are the things that count. So, if we can do a bit to make each other's lives a bit better, then we've made a real achievement in life, instead of just gaining so many thousands. Well, my show's about my stories too. This one's going to have to be short and sweet today because I've banged on a bit long, so I'll crack on. I may have to jump through a piece or two, but bear with me. These stories are just to show that despite suffering from crippling mental illness pretty much my whole life, I've managed to achieve a lot of things. I've travelled all over the world. I spent 7.5 years going all over the show, Africa, Europe, Asia, and I had a wild time. I sacrificed that for a cushy life, and if I had the choice, I'd do it again tomorrow. This is called Gallipoli in Istanbul. My good friend Wayne and I hitchhiked our way round the Aegean coast from Greece to Turkey. We first headed down to the small town of Konakli, which is near the beach they refer to as Gallipoli. Wayne and I didn't know what to expect, and we were amazed to find the place left pretty much unchanged from those terrible days when so many young had perished. There was a small museum temporarily manned by an old geezer, some well-tended graves at the top of the hill, one of them holding a 16-year-old boy who had died a day before peace was declared. And there's also a plaque from the term of President Ataturk in the most respectful terms that is written there for all to see. Those heroes that shed their blood and lost their lives, you are now lying on the soil of a friendly country, therefore rest in peace. There is no difference between the Johnnies and the Mehmets to us where they lay side by side here in this country of ours. You, the mothers who sent their sons from faraway countries, wipe away your tears. Your sons are now lying in our bosom and are in peace. After having lost their lives on this land, they have become our sons as well. Ataturk, 1934. Apart from this plaque, the graves and museums, very little had changed from those terrible days when those abortive landings had taken place. Down on Gallipoli Beach, there were thousands of corroded shell casings and bullets lying everywhere. Many of these have been taken as souvenirs by tourists and are quickly disappearing as a result. As we went inland, there were open trenches all over the place. Undisturbed from the times those poor boys had fallen, the trenches were full of skulls, leg and arm bones protruding from the earth. As the land grew steeper, the number of bones increased. I found myself crying at that sight. Despite the incredibly steep and exposed terrain, our boys managed to knock the Turks off the top. We smashed back and took it again before truce being declared. This graveyard to me seemed to be one full of ghosts. After spending the best part of a day at Gallipoli, we headed back to Konakli, where through David I met one of the last survivors of the Turkish campaign. He heaped praise on his old enemy for their fierceness and tenacity, especially the Kiwis. He told me of his extreme hardships fighting that war. It was quite overwhelming to hear how hard it had been, and humbling to hear what great respect he held for his old enemy. After a pleasant stay at Konakli, we headed up the peninsula and eastward onto Istanbul. This magnificent city on the Golden Horn is split in half by the Bosphorus Strait. On one side lies the new part of the city, with its high rises and western trappings like McDonald's. Fittingly enough, it is on the western bank and emphasises Turkey's wish to join the European Union. The eastern bank, however, is the old Byzantium and Constantinople of old. It still retains some of the old Topkapi Palace walls from the Ottoman Empire. Also the magnificent St. Sophia Byzantium period church, which has now been converted into a mosque. Erected at the height of the Byzantium period, it boasted the largest dome of any church for over 1,000 years. Down towards the banks, the dilapidated old buildings lean on each other like drunks in Istanbul. We stayed on the rooftop of one of these dodgy old places directly below the Blue Mosque, which sits in magnificence further up the hill. I walked up to a quadrant outside the incredible Blue Mosque with its 6 giant minarets. Its overall size is hard to take in. Entering the Blue Mosque, having first washed hands and feet in the cool water and covering from wrist to ankle, is a religious experience in itself. The eyes are drawn to the heavens by the untold thousands of beautiful handmade turquoise tiles, the bright light of God, their epicentre. The sheer scale only added potency to its message. The peace and serenity of this cool sanctuary was most welcome on a hot afternoon. Outside the quadrant is one of Cleopatra's Needles taken from Egypt during the height of the Byzantium Empire. They are scattered around the world now, one on the Champs-Élysées in Paris, another on the embankment in the Thames in London. It's strange how the power of an old empire is reused by the next great power. At night there was a sound show outside the Blue Mosque which lit up the castle like ancient times. The spectacular show transported the crowd back in time to when great sultans ruled over this magnificent city and brought light and civilization into an otherwise dark world. The mighty Ottoman Empire gradually collapsed during the 1920s, but a little of what they left is still there, and it is truly amazing to see so much. I headed back to our dodgy lodgings on the roof and got off to sleep with the help of the local hooch called Raki. At first light, the morning calling to prayer broke out across the old city via speakers on the minarets of the mosques. Haunting and beautiful, it is an experience that stays with you for a lifetime. By the nature of the development of the city, it is impossible to rebuild what has fallen into disrepair. The ruins, however, only enhance the beauty and mystique of this amazing old city. As I wandered down the street called Divignol, I came across a smoking cafe where the locals in their traditional loose clothes sat to while away a hot afternoon. The idea of this cafe is that you purchase a huge stub of tobacco for 100 or so lira. You are then waited upon by waiters who carry around coals on a plate. These are placed on the stub and put in a huge water pipe. These beautiful hookah pipes, as they are called, have a number of hoses and mouthpieces coming from them so the experience can be shared amongst friends. They also serve hot sweet tea called simply chai. The cafe itself is an open courtyard, protected from the sun by high walls. The tables, chairs and floors are solid granite and it is refreshingly cool. Old men sit around with friends chatting and puffing on their pipes. As I watch them, I am transcended in time and imagine the same scene having played out for centuries. Even sitting on my own, smoking and watching, was an extremely pleasant way to spend an afternoon. Despite the language barrier, I felt quite accepted. The combination of good tea and tobacco was quite intoxicating. I waited until the burning sun had stooped quite low before wandering down some narrow cobblestone streets. Old men sat on stools at short tables, drinking tea and playing backgammon. I asked an old guy for a game. The language barrier can be overcome with hand signals and a few words. Before long I was being thrashed, but I stuck with it until I could hold my own at the breakneck speed. Backgammon is like a national pastime for men, and we played many enjoyable games, some of which I won. We played well into dark that night, and I felt like I had travelled in time, as this time-honoured tradition played itself out. With my first real lesson in backgammon, I headed back down the hill to my rooftop bed. It was only possible to sleep during the small hours. Over the next few days, Wayne and I moved to cheaper accommodation which required a cheap bus ride just outside from the old city centre. We visited other great mosques like Suleiman the Magnificent's around the Golden Horn. We also went to local markets with their exotic foods and spices. The Turks are natural salesmen and always drive a hard bargain. Centuries of trading on the Silk Route seems to have honed their skills, making trading with them great fun. Despite obvious poverty, the city vibrantly bustles with trade. Handmade carpets are a favourite item with the Turks, and they go to great lengths to sell these works of art. The hot summer days of visiting mosques and markets, of smoking hookah pipes and nights of backgammon passed too quickly. Soon we were off down south, down the coast, but the indelible impression of Istanbul stayed with us for the rest of our lives. All right, well, it's nearly me for the day, but I just want to finish on a note saying thank you very much to Arrow Radio, especially Michael and Veronica, who manage the place and do an amazing job. You know, behind the scenes you don't realise how hard they work and how much they struggle sometimes to keep everything afloat. You know, they are extraordinarily dedicated, thoughtful, decent people who do an incredible service to the community. These are not people who are concerned with building a reputation, being flash, being on fancy radios. You know, Michael's had an extraordinary career over the years and has been involved in all kinds of things. You would have seen him on the telly a number of times over the years. And, you know, this is what they do now. They do this good work for the community, and I'm ever so grateful that not only did they give me this chance, they allow me to do this show with no sponsorship whatsoever. And it kind of sickens me to see these big fancy radio stations and people raising hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you know, I can't even get $120 a month to sponsor my show because unfortunately too many people pay lip service to what has become popular rather than showing that they actually care by getting behind people who have genuine legs on this situation, who have experience and were there long before they came and will be there long time after this is fashionable. So yeah, it would be nice to get some sponsorship, but I'm really, really grateful that despite that fact, for many years, over 5 years now, Michael and Veronica have supported me, and I know I must have tested their patience on occasions, but they've always stuck with me, and I am so, so grateful for that wonderful support. You know, they are part of my network, which helps me keep my shit together and stops me tipping off the edge and allows me to say to people, hey, I've been down that road and I've lived through it. I'm still living through it. Every day I do. Every day I live in isolation like you do during COVID. Well, that's my life all of the time. That's how I live. And I don't really have a hell of a lot of choice. And I have to live below the poverty line. I have to actually spend money, my own dole money, to do this show. You know, I have to sacrifice part of my food budget to make this happen. I have to find money for petrol. Luckily, my family are kind enough to support me, but for many years they didn't understand me at all and just abused me and called me obnoxious and, you know, just couldn't really understand. You know, just because you're mentally ill doesn't mean you're always going to be nice. Sometimes you can be angry, confrontational, frustrated that people just either can't, don't, won't understand, or really don't seem to give a shit. And, you know, it's very easy to become negative when you're mentally unwell. It is extraordinarily difficult to become positive, and a little bit of kindness, like what Michael and Veronica show me, can turn someone's life around, and it can save lives too. I'm also extraordinarily grateful to Aruna Patel, who spent a hell of a lot of time with me just working on being mindful, and that's to appreciate things and be aware of things, to see that there can be good amongst the bad, just a few good things in life. It's all you really need. And I want to say a big thanks to Wairarapa TV. It's great that they came on board, that we do this show. Don't forget, we've got the website, www.arrow, and there's podcasts on there from all the shows. All kinds of interesting people add all kinds of things to this show. And I'm also very grateful for the sponsors. Now, when I talk about big money, New Zealand On Air is one of the big sponsors of this place, and I'm very grateful that they do sprinkle a little bit of fairy dust down this way and allow us to keep going. But any support that the radio station can get would be very, very greatly achieved. You know, it would be nice to think that community does actually matter. To me it does, to Michael and Veronica, to Wairarapa TV, to all our sponsors and all the people who support this show. Community means a hell of a lot, and we would like to see the community get in behind us, spread the good work. I hope my good friends up in the Hawke's Bay are enjoying the show. It's nice to have you on board, and I hope to get up that way to those beautiful places, Hastings and Napier, and walk along Ocean Beach again sometime. I love that spot. And to my friends in the Wairarapa, stay tight, support each other during COVID, and try and show a bit of kindness and a bit of consideration towards each other, because that's what's going to keep us together and get us through this. So let's support each other and just be mindful that some people need a bit of help, and if you can be that help, will be greatly appreciated. It's my show. Thanks very much. See you again next week. Bye for now.